This conference will now be recorded.
Love it when you hear that. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to announce that the technology is all working today. We have it on the big screen. We have our worldwide audience joining us. I think the day's off to a great start. And I'm on my second cup of caffeine. First one hot, second one cold. So rock and roll. Today we're going to talk about negotiating, particularly through the real estate transaction. And in our minds, when we typically think about negotiating, we typically go to that first interaction with the co-op agent. If we're representing the buyer, it's when we're making our offer. Or if we're on the list side, when that offer comes in, and then both sides go to work for their client. And that is undoubtedly the biggest negotiation that we're going to experience in the real estate transaction, but it is not the last. Now, y'all help me. What other negotiations, once we agree on price and terms, what other negotiations could take place before we get to the closing table? The option period. Well, we're going to negotiate, that's a term. We're going to negotiate the length of the option period and the amount of the option money in the initial contract. Or did you mean something else? You meant, so you're talking about negotiating repairs. That's exactly right. That's usually the second big negotiation point. What else could we negotiate through this transaction? Now this is, we're under contract. We've negotiated price and terms. Now we've negotiated repairs coming out of the option period inspection. What else could happen before closing that would trigger a negotiation? The appraisal. Very good. Those are the three big points at which we may need to bring our skills to bear on behalf of our client. And what do you know? We're going to talk about all three in class today. I entitle my negotiating strategy, Put Some Sugar With It, because that embodies my philosophy of how you get the best deal for your client. And it helps you sleep better at night because you're not in a combative mood all day long, right? You're looking to share some love, some rainbows and unicorns and daisies throughout the day. And as you do that, obviously sets you up for a good night's sleep. Here's what I mean. Many agents, in understanding appropriately that their primary role is to be a fiduciary for their client, to get the best deal for their client, they think the way they do that is to put their dukes up and beat up the other side. You don't have to be an agent for very long, be involved in too many transactions, and you're going to come across agents who buy into that philosophy. They are the bullies of our industry. They tend to be the more experienced agents. They tend to be higher producing agents, where they think that by virtue of their reputation or their personal market share, they are entitled to dictate the terms of this transaction. And golly gee whiz, you better get in line, and you better get your client in line. And I'm speaking from some pretty extensive experience about this. I can't tell you how many agents have said to me in the course of negotiations, "Oh, you must be new." And what they mean by that is, why are you resisting me? Okay, why aren't you just falling into line? Why do you keep advocating on behalf of your client? Don't you know that when I say it's going to be this way, it's going to be this way? That is a bully. And they will often pick at your experience level or your perceived experience level to use as leverage against you. Oh, you must be new. You don't understand the way this is done. And of course, I laugh when people use that one on me because I've been doing this since 1990. Okay, I'm sorry, 1992. I guess I have been doing it too long. I can't even remember. 1992. I've been doing this a long, long time. But bullies want you to just fall in line with every aspect of the negotiation. And I'm saying your fiduciary is to get the best deal for your client. That's your role at every step, at every point of negotiation. But I believe, and this is in contrast to the bullies, I believe you will most often get the best deal for your client when you are kind, polite, complete in your communication, and professional. When you treat everybody else in the transaction as if they are a human being also, with their own thoughts and feelings and emotions and perspectives and opinions, and you respect those, you treat them with respect. In all your communications, you're professional, even when they're being a bully or they're being unprofessional and perhaps they're being unresponsive. They haven't even acknowledged your offer. The option period is coming up. We only have 30 minutes left and I can't even get a return phone call. That kind of stuff. The way I like to portray this is we always want to be the police officer at the accident scene. You know, there may be a lot of people losing their minds. There may be a lot of people with things at risk, very important things at risk. But we don't serve our clients well by getting emotional or getting personal. When I say personal, starting to attack or demean the other parties in the transaction. Like the police officer, we serve best when we maintain our professional demeanor. Everything else is going crazy, and yet we are the calm center. Calm, polite, kind. I believe if you'll do that, you will develop a reputation in the real estate market, and other agents will want to do business with you. And that will serve your clients at a very high level right there. And I have actually advised my clients when I've been on the listing side and we're in a multiple offer situation and the offers are very similar. We're not just comparing price and term offers. I will often say to my seller, I've worked with all three of these buyer's agents, and I can tell you this one's going to be unreasonable, and this one is going to get their buyer all stirred up against us. But this one, I've done a few deals with, and they always seem to go well. They represent their client well, but they're reasonable, and they'll work with us for a win-win solution. So that's how you serve your client. You get that kind of reputation, and you will give an advantage to your offers in a competitive situation. So put some sugar with it, create an environment for win-win negotiations. The goal, to obtain the best possible deal for our clients. Our skill as negotiators determines whether we can meet this goal. So let me just say thank you for y'all for being here, right? Because you're investing in your career, you're investing in your clients with this time to sharpen your skills. First things first, and this is kind of the softer side of negotiations. I want to just make a few seemingly random comments, but they're extremely important. You want to project confidence and competence to all parties at all times. This is especially important if you are inexperienced. If you come in saying, gosh, this is my first one, you say to the co-op agent, hey, I may need you to walk me through this. I know I presented the offer, but if you would review it for me, I would have, this is real life. That really happens. And I'm saying you are sabotaging the best interests of your client. I don't care if it's your very first deal and it's a lease. You throw your shoulders back, you speak with authority and with confidence. And if it's something that you really don't know about, then you say to your clients or the co-op agent, I need a little bit of time to look into this, and then I'll get back with you. You don't even have to say, I'm going to go talk to my broker, I'm going to go talk to a more experienced agent. You just say, that's a great question. I'm going to take a little bit of time and do some research, and then I'll get back with you. And everybody will respect that. And it will not raise red flags about inexperience or lack of confidence. If you believe in yourself, so will they. If you have doubts about yourself, they will smell that out and they will get scared. I'm talking about your client. They're like, oh my goodness, I'm about to spend $475,000 and my agent isn't even sure what goes in that blank. Okay, that's scary. That's scary. So if you don't believe, like you're like, well, I really don't have the competence because I don't have the experience, then you fake it. Okay, that's where you throw your shoulders back and you speak with authority and you say something like, great question, let me look into it and I'll get back with you in a little bit. Okay, that's not so much faking it, but I love that little phrase, fake it till you make it. So I threw it in there because even if you have doubts, you never want to let that show through. The first time a police officer shows up on an accident scene, right? And there's blood everywhere and cars rolled over and tow trucks coming and ambulance. Do you think that police officer is scared? Absolutely, they're human beings, but they better not show it. They better be out there directing traffic, putting people where they need to be, and then they can go have a beer or a good cry or whatever they got to do to work through the emotions of it. Maintain an upbeat attitude and a positive perspective at all times, even when things are falling apart. And the reason this is so important is that your clients are going to take their emotional cues from you, right? They don't do this every day. They don't know if they should be panicked or not. So who are they looking to? They're looking to the professional who does this every day. If you're panicked, oh my goodness, they're going to lose their mind. If you're unsure, then doubts are going to be raised in their mind. So you always want to be upbeat and positive. If you freak out, so will they. If you get angry, how dare that listing agent talk to us like that? How dare those buyers give us a lowball offer like that? If you get angry, they'll get angry. So be the calm in the midst of the storm. Make the other agent your ally, not your adversary. This may be kind of the heart of the whole thing of the philosophy. Remember, we're creating an environment for win-win relationships. We don't want to be adversarial with the cooperating agent. We want to get around on the same side of the table with them and say, hey, we all want the same thing, right? Buyer wants to buy, seller wants to sell. And they've agreed this is the house that they're going to sell and they're going to buy. How can we make this happen? Work as a team to get there. And a good agent on the other side will understand that and cooperate. So there's a few core beliefs that are going to put you in the right mindset. Remember, our beliefs drive our behavior. We can't behaviorally do anything consistently over time that we don't actually believe. So getting our beliefs right is going to enable us to step into this positive attitude, win-win mentality much easier. Let your client, I'm sorry, here's the core belief. First of all, conflict only arises when expectations differ. Let that sink in. That's a game changer. The first time I heard that 10 years ago, I started thinking about every area of my life, not just in my real estate sales, but at home. You know, it's only when two people are expecting something different that conflict arises. If we all expected the same thing, whether it's what we wanted or not, there's no point of conflict. So let your client know, this is setting expectations for your client. Let them know in advance that the other party will negotiate for their best interests just as we are. So we think the home is worth $475 as the sellers. They're offering $460. Is that because they don't respect us? Are they insulting us with that offer? No, what are they doing? They're trying to get the best deal. And is there anything wrong with that? Isn't that, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, exactly what we're going to do? We've asked for 75, but we've also asked for the weekend to host an open house and get a lot of exposure for the home. We're not even going to make a decision on an offer till 5 p.m. on Monday. Why are we doing all that? We're trying to create a multiple offer situation and drive the final sale price even above the 475 list. We're acting in our best interest to get the best deal. The buyer is doing exactly the same thing. So there's no point in demonizing them or trying to guess at some kind of sinister motive on their part. That's not it at all. They're humans just like us. They want to negotiate the best deal possible. Prepare your client for multiple negotiations: initial contract, repairs, appraisal, non-realty items. This is the barbecue grill in the backyard, perhaps the chandelier that they took down, but you saw it in the garage and your buyers want it, that kind of thing. And amendments to extend the closing date, which have been a bigger deal the last couple of years than they are now. When COVID first hit, actually the real estate market dropped, like the floor dropped out for about 30 days. And then it was off to the races, and it's been pedal to the metal ever since. But in that initial surge, when everybody said, well, if we got to be confined to our houses, we want a bigger house, we want a nicer house. Closing dates were missed routinely because the appraisers were overwhelmed and lenders couldn't get appraisals done on time. And so you get some sellers who'd be upset about that, right? No, the contract says we're closing on the 17th. You close on the 17th, or we're going to sue you, or we're going to cancel the contract and keep the earnest money. But a good listing agent would counsel the sellers about the situation in advance, not when it happened. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we've just accepted this contract with a 6-week close. In a normal market, that's plenty of time to get the financing in place and close. But we're not in a normal market right now, and appraisers are overwhelmed. We just need to be prepared that it's possible that the closing will need to be extended by a week or two. But I'm going to closely monitor the situation. I'm going to be in contact with the buyer's lender. I'm going to be talking to them directly so that I know exactly what's happening, what the expectations are, and if it looks like that's going to happen, I'm going to let you know as soon as possible so that you can make adjustments with movers and school schedules and who's going to keep the dog and all that kind of stuff. So you're setting these expectations in advance that, due to factors outside our control, there could be some bumps in the road. And now that you've set that expectation, if there's a bump in the road, the conflict should be dissipated. Conflict only arises when expectations differ. It's win-win or no deal. This is another negotiating belief that will drive positive behavior for you. And it's what we call a default belief. What I mean by that is, it's not uncommon for one party to be upset at closing. In a normal market, it's more typically the seller. They tend to be grumpy. In this market, it's quite often the buyer, because the initial surge of joy and happiness that we finally got the 17th home we put an offer on. We finally won the deal. We finally got the house. Between now and closing, what that buyer starts to think about is, yeah, but our budget was $275. We ended up having to pay $315. And what happens now if the economy goes in the tank and interest rates go up, and this $315 that we've agreed to, suddenly the home value drops down to $265. So the buyer has all this anxiety right now. They get to closing and they're a little nervous about what they're agreeing to do. So that's not uncommon. It's almost always going to be on one side or the other that there's some uncertainty. And what you want to have in your mind is, yes, that may happen, and it may be my client, but they would not have agreed to this deal if they did not believe it was in their best interest. And you might have to remind them of that. Yes, we're going in at 315, and yes, we have no idea what's going to happen in the future. No crystal ball here. We can't predict what's going to happen to values. We hope you're going to get appreciation, which historically is the case, but have there been dips? Absolutely. We had the last one in 2007 to 2009, huge correction in the marketplace. But remember why we agreed to this. You have to have a place to live. You need a roof over your head. You wanted to be in this school district, and you wanted a home with a pool. And when we looked at everything on the market, this was it. This was the house, the right price, right school district with a pool. So remembering that, we really had no other option. So just keep in mind, nobody is going to agree to a deal that in the moment they do not believe is in their best interest. Sellers will sometimes be upset with you in a more normal market. Sellers are typically partying at closing now because they're getting so much more money than they expected. But in a normal market, sellers are almost always grumpy because if you sold it fast, they felt like you underpriced it. And if it took a longer time, 6, 8, 12 weeks to sell, then they think you weren't doing your job. It really is tough. If you've not been through a normal market, you know, you probably presume that sellers are always happy, and that's not the case. So help yourself get through those times emotionally by reminding yourself, if the seller had had a better offer, they would have taken it, right? This was the best offer we got, and you agreed to take it. For buyers, if you could have bought a better home for a lower price, guess what? You would have bought it. You made the decision, given all options on the market, that this was in your best interest. This was your win. That's what I mean by default belief. People are not going to do things that they don't believe are in their best interest. If they want A, they're not going to choose B if A is available. So just kind of internalize this so that you don't take on the emotional burden and baggage of buyer's remorse or seller's remorse, which very frequently happens by the time you get to closing. Okay, let's talk about setting buyer expectations. You're representing the buyer. Conflict only arises when expectations differ. So in our buyer conversation, what mindsets do we want our buyer to understand and adopt? Several things. First of all, you need to understand, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, your offer is not going to be received or taken seriously without a pre-approval letter or proof of funds. They need to understand that up front before they find their dream home and they want to make an offer, but they haven't even met with the lender yet. Okay. Or they're wealthy, they're planning on paying cash, but they don't want to share any financial statements that would demonstrate they have the cash. By the way, the best way around that is simply to ask for a letter from their banker. The most recent situation I was in, that's what we had to do. And the banker just said, please be assured that Mr. and Mrs. Buyer have sufficient funds in their account with our bank to complete a cash purchase of a home with the value of $540,000, just something like that. And banks produce that very consistently. A pre-approval letter from a reputable local lender will be looked upon more favorably than a pre-approval letter from an out-of-state or out-of-town lender that nobody's ever heard of. And by the way, you want to be very nervous if your buyer insists on using this California lender that you've never heard of. I can't tell you the times I've nearly lost my mind trying to get the lender to provide the docs by in time to meet the closing date, and they just don't care. Because why? They're in California. They've never met me. They know they're never going to do business with me again. They're never going to do business with this buyer again. I have no leverage whatsoever. They just don't care. But when you're dealing with a local lender, these are people you see all the time, know all the time, have the potential to do future business with. Do you think they're going to give you and your client a higher level of service? Absolutely. And sellers know that. So they look more favorably upon an offer with a local lender. 3, a lowball offer typically backfires by offending the seller and causing them to harden their positions on price and terms. If the market value based upon your CMA says 475 and your buyer says, yeah, I understand, but who knows? Let's give it a shot at 445. You can do that. Your job is to represent them, write that offer and present it. But as a consultant, you have a responsibility to inform them of the likely consequences of that action. And I have represented sellers before who we got a lowball offer, and that lowball offeror was willing to go to full market value, but the seller was unwilling to work with them because they offended the seller by the original lowball offer. So just understand, you're counseling your buyer here, the consequences of that kind of strategy. A quality CMA will tell us the market value of the home. The definition of market value is what the home will sell for in an unpressurized market. Unpressurized means that there's no mitigating factors, such as it's the parents who are purchasing the home from the children. Well, they might want to pay more, right, just to help the kids. But in an open market, no extraneous factors, what will the home sell for? That is the definition of market value, okay? So we're going to do a CMA for every transaction, representing a buyer or representing a seller. The seller so we know where to list, and the buyer so we know what to offer. And by the way, you have not just a professional responsibility to do that. Do you have a legal responsibility to do that? Are you aware of this? TREC requires that you produce a CMA on every transaction and that you save a copy of that CMA for how long? 4 years. 4 years. Every transaction document you are required to have and be able to produce for 4 years. And by the way, it's not just the contract documents, it's not just the CMA, it's the log of all of your conversations and interactions with your client. Isn't that scary? The log. Yeah. Duly noted. We'll do that. Yes, ma'am. Yes, you still do a CMA, right? Because your job is to properly counsel your client on value. So even if this property is not on the market, you can still find comps that are going to help you determine the appropriate market value.
And even like the new builds as well.
Oh, yes. Yeah, there's no carve out exception on the CMA. That is one of the primary values that we bring to this client relationship, is to advise them on value. So a buyer doesn't overpay and the seller doesn't underpay or undersell. Do you know why Sky Slope requires it? Because EXP requires it, because it's the law. Yes.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I'm putting in my transaction now. It has it on there because it says like.
Yeah, some of those if applicables turn red before you get to the end of the transaction. Okay. It's okay to offer less than market value. We're counseling our buyers. But if you're not willing to negotiate up to market value, we should not waste our time, but should instead find a home more suited to your needs. If market value is 500, we can offer 475, but we need to be prepared to go to 500. And if you're not, we need to go find you a house whose market value is what? 475. That's exactly right. Right, because sellers aren't stupid. They are represented by a professional realtor who puts the home on the MLS. Once it's exposed to the market, we find out what market value is. That's how we find it, because the market sees it and then responds to that value with offers or not to confirm what the value is. Okay, so don't, and we had in my Frank Gray team meeting yesterday, we had one of our agents say that she works with an investor who just consistently wants to lowball offers. And that's what sometimes investors do. Sometimes investors refuse to pay market value. They want a deal. They're looking for maybe an estate situation where the son who inherited the property lives in Oregon and doesn't know what values are. And so they'll accept 250 when it's really worth 350. They're looking for that kind of unicorn. And those things exist out there, maybe 1 in 100, 1 in 200 deals. But I'm saying if you're representing a buyer and they're looking for a home where their family is going to live, school district matters, parks matter, proximity to restaurants matter, and doctors matter, quality of life matters, then your buyer needs to be prepared to pay market value. And if they're not, scale down what you're working on to a budget that they're comfortable with. Special considerations in a seller's market. Which kind of market are we in right now? The sellers have the power. A lot of us are hoping that that's going to shift. This seller's market has gone on much longer than anybody predicted. But hopefully there will be some balance come to the force at some point. If no other factors cause that to happen, I think interest rates will cause that to happen. More buyers will come out of the market, and sellers won't have multiple offers to choose from, and they'll have to be more reasonable. But in the market that we're in right now, just a few points I want you to understand. Cash is king. And I've personally been shocked at how much cash is out there. I've been shocked at the money people have come up with. You know, a home that sold for $350 last year is suddenly worth $450, and everybody's fighting to pay the $450. Like, well, where'd you get the extra 100 grand? You know, but people have it. And they don't want a financed offer, they want $450 cash. Okay, here's $450, here's $450. Where are people getting this money? I want in on that gravy train. I've been shocked, but this is why you may make an offer $20,000, $30,000 over list, and you don't even get a call back. Why? Because it was a financed offer and they had a cash offer. Cash is king. Among financed offers, conventional is king. If the buyer gets a conventional, an FHA, a VA, and a USDA offer, they're going with conventional. Tell me why. It has to do with the appraisal. A government-backed loan, VA, USDA, FHA, will not permit the buyer, it's illegal for the buyer to contractually commit themselves to pay more than the appraised value for the home. And in this market, appraisals are very consistently coming in short of the contract sale price, because appraisals are based on historical data, and historical data, everything that's closed in the past, sold for less than they're selling for now. So we're in a situation, again, sellers aren't stupid, they know that. So if they're going to accept a financed offer, they want it to be conventional financing so that the buyer is legally able to sign that appraisal addendum where they waive the right to cancel the contract if the appraisal comes in below contract sale price. Okay? Any questions about that? I realize that can be a little complicated. Does it make sense?
The purpose of the normal deal is the buyer has the ability with third-party financing to withdraw if it doesn't appraise. So with the seller's market, you are adding an appraisal waiver.
Correct.
The buyer is waiving.
Correct.
The parent's right. They already have that right. They're waiving it.
Correct. They have that right by virtue of what document? The third-party financing addendum clearly states that if the appraisal is short of the sale price, the property has failed to gain approval. Buyer can cancel and get the earnest money back. The third party is also what states that if it's a government-sponsored loan, the buyer cannot give away their right of cancellation. Okay. With a conventional offer, you will want to include an appraisal waiver so that the seller knows they're going to get the contract sale price, regardless of what happens with the appraisal.
You may need to.
You may need to. Yeah, I shouldn't say must, but in most situations today, if you're doing conventional, you'll want to include an appraisal waiver. Okay. Call the listing agent. This is now presuming you're representing the buyer and your buyer has found a home that they want to make an offer on. Okay, this is kind of the first stage where the rubber hits the road. Now we're moving into the negotiation role. I recommend that you call the listing agent, thank them for allowing you to show the home. Why would you do that? Because nobody else does, right? Set yourself apart. We're putting some sugar with it. We're being kind. We're being polite. Comment on the positive features of the home. The buyers really love that outdoor kitchen. And you can hardly find a kitchen with Formica countertops anymore, and they really love Formica, okay? Whatever it is, you can't stain it, you can't damage it, it's gonna last. Be positive. And this is a little counterintuitive because some agents think you need to be negative about everything to justify your lowball price or not make the seller think that your buyer really wants it. I'm saying just be kind, just be positive, be complimentary. Tell the listing agent, I'd love if you don't mind sharing with me who your photographer is because your photographs were outstanding. Your property description is one of the best I've read in a long time. Find something to be complimentary about. If the disclosures aren't available on the MLS, ask that copies be provided. Seller's disclosure, HOA, that kind of thing. Ask if there are any current offers on the home. If there are, and this is where you really need to kind of put some sugar with it, because you need to ask this in a very sweet, professional voice. Are any of these current offers strong enough to be seriously considered by the seller? That's a question they don't hear. They hear, well, how much are these offers? How high do we got to go to get the deal? And what are they going to tell you? Can't say that. I'm prohibited by law from telling you that. It's not true, but that's what they're going to say. Okay. So you want to ask it a different way. Are there any offers currently on the table that are strong enough to lead to an acceptance by the seller? If yes, if they are, say, yeah, absolutely. We've got 2 or 3 on the table that are really good. Well, then what is the timetable for the seller making a decision on these offers? And they'll typically tell you, well, we're going to decide tonight or Monday at 5 p.m. Let them know that your buyer is considering making an offer. State that you and your client want the transaction to be a win-win for both the buyer and the seller. Again, you're setting this positive environment for a win-win outcome. So in preparing the offer, you would like to know if the seller has any issues of special importance. Why would you ask? Because no one else has, right? They've just presumed that the seller wants the most amount of money and close in the shortest amount of time. And that is not always the primary consideration of the seller. So you're going to ask, what's most important to our seller? Is it the price? Is it the closing date? Is it a leaseback situation? Does the seller want to close and maybe stay in the home a few more days? or choice of title company. And normally in a normal market, I'm all for arm wrestling the other side to get your title company. We can go deep on that in another conversation. But in this market, if you're representing the buyer, well, Mr. or Mrs. Listing Agent, do you have a preferred title company that I could include in the offer? Okay, they always will. So accommodate them, because again, you're wanting to get on the same side of the table with this agent. Some added sugar, another lump of sugar in there, okay? Assure the listing agent that your client will consider the seller's needs when drafting the offer. So what you're doing, you're setting yourself up, even if you've never worked with this listing agent before, you're trying to differentiate yourself from all the other buyer's agents who've presented offers, so that if you're in a close situation, you know, there's only $1,000 separate or a few days on the closing date, that listing agent will steer the seller towards acceptance of your offer, because the listing agent doesn't want a lot of drama. And some buyer's agents are drama kings and drama queens. You want to position yourself as the reasonable, kind agent. You're not going to get into the option period, have an inspection done, and just send them a copy of the report and say, fix everything, right? That's unreasonable. You're going to be very reasonable, and you're demonstrating that right up front. 6, let the listing agent know when to expect the offer. I'm going to be having a conversation with my buyer just as soon as we're off the phone here, and presuming that they still want to move forward, I should have an offer to you by about 6 p.m. this evening. Is that going to be acceptable to your seller? Absolutely. We're not going to make a decision till tomorrow anyway. Okay, but you're asking just in case. Well, we were going to make a decision at 4. Can you get us an offer before then? Let me do everything possible. Let me get to work on it right now. Okay, you need to know. Describe the buyer in a positive light. And I caution you, do not use protected class characteristics, because now you set yourself up for a fair housing claim. You don't want to do that, but you can describe them as pre-approved. That's not a protected class. As professional, as they're very serious about this offer. We've looked at 17 homes, and of all 17, this is the only one that meets their criteria. They really, really love this home. We're going to do everything possible to get this home. They're relocating because of a company transfer. They're repeat clients. You've worked with them many times in the past, and they're good people. They're reasonable people. So describe them in a positive light without touching on protected classes. By the way, protected classes would be children. Oh, they have 3 kids and they are so cute. Okay, familial status, right? Be careful about that. Close by stating that you're looking forward to a great working relationship with the listing agent and a positive outcome for all parties. Why would you say that? Because nobody else does, right? Right? You want a positive outcome for the seller? You represent the buyer. Yes, we're looking for a win-win relationship. We want everybody happy at the closing table. We'll all be drinking out of the same bottle of champagne. Okay? Yes, you set that tone that that's what it's going to be like to work with you. You're going to want a win-win for everybody involved. Okay? Second thing you need to do is determine the offer price. So now you've had the conversation, you know what's important to the seller, now you're consulting with your buyer. The foundational piece in this decision is the CMA. You can't simply say, they're asking $450, geez, in this market, we better come in at least $465, because everything's selling above market. That is not a CMA, right? That's your personal opinion. But you need your personal opinion to be supported by the facts of a CMA. So you have to actually run the numbers, and then you can show this information to your buyer, and they'll know you're not just making them up. You're not trying to get a higher commission, telling them to to offer over list, you're showing them they're asking 450. The last home that sold in this neighborhood closed 3 weeks ago, and it was at 450. I suspect that's where the sellers got their price. But if you look at the trend analysis that you also provide as part of your CMA, you can see that prices were at 370 just 4 months ago. They're just going up and up and up, $10,000 to $15,000, $20,000 a month. I suspect this home is going to sell somewhere between 465 and 475. This is your job as a consultant. Based upon this trend line, this is where I think it's going to be. To get the home, we're probably going to have to be in that mix, okay? If the home is listed over market value, advise your client to offer market value. Let's say that the last home that sold, to use the same example, was 3 weeks ago, it closed at 450. You think this one is going to sell somewhere 465 to 475, but it's listed at 5.25. The sellers got too ambitious, right? They saw the trend line and they tried to get 2 or 3 steps ahead of it. No, it may sell for 5.25 in June, but this is still February, okay? 465 to 475 is where the offers are going to come in. You don't, unless your buyer is just paying cash and they don't care, they want this house, then they can come in and offer 525 or whatever they want. But in a normal buyer situation where they don't have unlimited funds, you can counsel them. The seller's asking 525, they're way over the market. I think the home is actually going to sell 465 to 475. I would recommend you present an offer in that range. I'm counseling you to counsel your buyers in that way. Unless they're just like, well, we just sold our California home for $3 million. We don't want to lose this one. We're going to offer full price. Then fine, help them do that. Number 3, if the home is listed at market value, advise your client to offer no less than 98% of market value. That's a normal market piece of advice. I would update that for today's and say offer no less than 100%. Okay? Because normally, it's so weird. We haven't been normal for a couple years. Normally, if you're counseling a seller and the market value is 400, where does the seller want to list? 410, 412? Why? What will the seller say to you? If you say it's worth, market value is 400, the seller's going to say, well, can we come in at 410 because, what's the because? We want to leave room for negotiations. That's exactly right. So they're not expecting somebody to come in and pay 410 in a normal market. These days, they're going to expect 420. Okay, but it's just kind of weird. But I'm trying to teach you what's normal because this seller's market is not going to stick around forever. If the home is offered at less than market value, advise your client to offer the list price. Okay, market value is 420. It's listed for 410. What are we going to offer? 410. It's listed below market. We're going to make a full price offer at list price. There's no reason to throw away 10 grand. Now, let me just caution you here though. There's one little caveat we need to put in here. Some listing brokers have a strategy of underpricing their listings. Why would they do that? To create a feeding frenzy. And if that, you need to recognize that if that's the case, and if that is the situation, then this advice wouldn't apply. You're going to go in and offer market value. You know, a home that's worth 330 and they put it on the market at 265, that's a game. You need to offer 330. Okay, why? Because everybody else is. People aren't going to come in and offer 265. The agents are going to tell the buyers, This is just a game. They're just trying to get 50 offers in, okay? So if it's listed below market and you understand that's what's going on, offer market. Okay, in a multiple offer situation, advise your client to offer the highest price they're willing to pay for the home, even if it's over list price and or market value. Current market value demonstrated by the CMA. Once we're under contract and close, we've established a new market value. In a competitive situation, you really can't pay over market because what you pay is the definition of market, even if it's higher than what was there previously. If they're paying cash, now listen carefully, this is one of the few times you will ever hear a broker say, write this in special provisions. But I am unaware of any promulgated form which addresses this issue. And therefore, special provisions is appropriate. Here it is. If they're paying cash, insert a clause in special provisions that they may withdraw from the contract and receive their earnest money back if the home does not appraise for contract price. That is a normal market piece of advice. That's right. There's no third-party financing addendum which gives them the right to cancel. So many times on a cash offer, they won't even have an appraisal done. But maybe 35% of the time they do. And if they're concerned that they don't want to overpay, then that's where you can write in special provisions. If home does not appraise for contract sale price, buyer may terminate the contract and receive the earnest money. Okay. In a seller's market, ding, 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 it's important to offer cash or conventional financing. We talked about that. In fact, you're going to see in the MLS right now, very frequently, the statement or under financing options, VA, USDA, FHA, not acceptable. Cash or conventional offers only. They're stating that right on the MLS. Now, in a desperate situation, and that means that your buyers are desperate. They've put in 17 offers. They haven't gotten any of them. Why? Because they only have 3% to put down. So they're making FHA offers and sellers aren't interested. And you can see that there's no foreseeable end to this market. We don't know when it's going to shift, but your buyers have to move now. You can exercise the nuclear option, which would be call Divvy or a company like Divvy, who will come in and make a cash offer at market value, quick close on behalf of your buyer. So now they can win, they can get it. They're not going to own it. They're going to rent it from Divvy. But they have a contractual right to purchase that home at a predetermined price whenever they have the funds or the credit score, they're in a better situation to be able to purchase, they can get it from Divvy. They're going to pay a little bit of a premium for that, as opposed to if they'd had cash to buy the home in their own name up front. But if they're like, we have to be in this neighborhood, or this is the house that's next door to my aged mother, we have to have this house. And by the way, I didn't make that. I was in a situation like that one time. I had a home. It was the buyers had paid too much, and then he got transferred, and so they were trying to get their money back, and the house just languished, just sat on the market. Nobody wanted to pay that price, and the sellers didn't want to take a loss on it. Thank God there was a family that came in from Mexico, and they had a family member right next door, and they had to have that house. Okay, sometimes it happens. They wanted to be neighbor. They wanted to be next door neighbors, so we got our price. Other terms. So we talked about price. There was the price negotiation. Other issues. Take the seller's needs, learn from that initial conversation with the listing agent into consideration, and accommodate them when you can. Be aware that the seller typically pays for the owner's title policy. So when you're filling it out, typically the listing agent, the seller, will expect you to indicate that on the offer.
Can you do both, check both boxes? I saw that on one.
Yes, you can. The title company is going to think that's a mistake. And so if it's not, you want to indicate in a cover letter to the title company what that means, that they're going to share the expense. You could even put a little explanatory note in special provisions that buyer and seller will share cost of the owner's title policy. Okay?
I do that.
Is that what you do? Well, if Melly does it, see, I'm a little uncomfortable with it because it is in the contract. We checked both boxes. You're never supposed to write anything in special provisions that's already covered in the contract, but it's not clear. And so that's why I think it's okay in this situation, even though it's addressed, since it's not clear, to put some kind of clarifying statement in special provisions. In regard to the option fee, what's typical is to offer $100. Just one second, Ann's, we got a comment. It's very, oops, hold on. Ann, I'm gonna open up the chat. Where did it go? We'll see what your comment is. It's very common right now for the buyer to pay for their own title commitment. I just had a multiple offer situation where 5 out of 7 buyers offered this. So why would they do that in this market? They're looking for every advantage, right, to improve the quality and attractiveness of their offer. What's interesting is the choice of title company is always a matter of negotiation. The seller doesn't get to dictate choice of title just because they're paying OTP. But TREC states, this is in the law, if the buyer pays both the lender title policy and the owner's title policy, the buyer can dictate the choice of title company. Now, I'm not recommending that you exercise that right in this scenario because we want to be on the listing agent's good graces. You know what? We'll pay OTP and lender title policy. Where would you like to close? Okay. But in a normal market, that's a situation where you can get your title company if the buyer's willing to pay OTP, and you can adjust. If they're willing to pick up that expense, you can, in a normal market, you can adjust perhaps your offer price a little bit lower or adjust other terms to even it out. Typical option fee is $100 for each $100,000 in offer price. That's 1/10 of 1%. That's how you think of it. So $300,000, you know, 1% of that is 3,000, and 1% of that, or 10% of that is 300. So you just drill it down that way. And if it's an odd number, like $315,000, just do 300. You don't have to do, you know, $315.67. There's no reason to do that. In a competitive situation, you can increase this amount to demonstrate seriousness. And then fourth, typical earnest money deposit is 1% of the offer price. And there's little risk in increasing this amount if it makes the offer more attractive. Again, this is something kind of like paying OTP. That's real money out of the buyer's pocket. Here, if a normal earnest money deposit would be $3,000, your buyer could offer $10,000. It looks like a much stronger offer. It really has almost no effect. Almost no effect, because if the buyer is wanting to cancel during the option period, they'll get the earnest money back. If they can't get financing as expected, as long as they cancel within the financing period, they can get it all back. So as long as you're managing those dates and deadlines, there's very little risk to beefing up your earnest money offer. 21 to 25 days is a typical time frame for obtaining final loan approval. But in this market, I would have a conversation with the lender before you write the offer. I know at Jackson Henry, we send 80% of our loans to one particular wholesale lender, UWM. They're closing our loans in an average of 14 days. contract to close. So if it's possible for the buyer to close quickly and attractive to the seller, and you have to ask because you can't presume, but if everybody wants and is willing to close quickly, you don't have to put 21 to 25 days for approval period. Typically it's 21 to 25 for approval and still 6 weeks till closing. You could do a 7 to 10 day approval period and a 14-day closing in many situations today. The appraisal bottleneck has largely been solved. So we're not in the situation that we were 18 to 24 months ago. 10 days is a typical time period for an option period. These days, I'm seeing 7 days, 5 days. By the way, is it possible to do what needs to be done during the option period in 5 days? Absolutely. So I wouldn't go typical 10. I'd get your inspector, again, before you're writing the offer, call your inspector. Hey, we're submitting an offer on this home. Is there any chance you could get out tomorrow or the next day and have me the inspection report same night? Almost always they'll say yes. And then you can have a very short option period. We are seeing offers now, I suspect Anna's seeing these as well, where there's what? No option period. Now that's typically very scary, but there's a couple scenarios in which it makes sense. One, we discussed about in our team meeting yesterday. If you have a savvy investor client and they've walked the property, they know what to look for, they're a professional, then they may not feel the need to have a professional inspection. The other scenario, and this is a little bit sneakier, is if the listing agent / seller did not provide a MUD notice prior to execution of the contract and the home is in a MUD district. Because if they provide that MUD notice, if you don't have it when y'all sign everything, your buyer has an automatic get out of jail free card all the way to closing. And we have had agents in our group, the Abbey team, use this to their advantage to present a strong offer with no option period, knowing the MUD notice was not provided in advance. And then I know of one specific situation where they used that provision to terminate the contract and get the earnest money back. The listing agent was completely shocked, thought it was totally illegal, had never heard of this before. But once they talked to their broker and the title company, seller signed off on the earnest money release. Okay. Oh, you just had a light bulb moment there, didn't you, Si?
I just wonder if it's ever actually gone to court, because the other party's attorney argued that it was your realtor's responsibility to make sure you were made aware of the notice as well.
It is contractually the seller's responsibility to provide the MUD notice. Yes, legally, the seller's responsibility.
I think the attorneys look at it and they'll say, oh, and because it was a home or something, and they, I mean, isn't that where it is?
Yes, Michael Hughes is the smartest guy I know in Texas on this issue, and he can actually cite you and provide you with the statutes in the Texas statutes, the law. No, because the law is so clear on this that once you provide this information to the listing broker, they're like, okay, you got us. And then they're going to have a class on it with their agents and educate them. Okay. All right. Other terms. Use your preferred title company unless the listing agent has a strong preference. In this market, you always want to do that. Okay. Go with the listing agent's preferred title company. Now, so we've drafted our offer. We've taken seller desires and needs into consideration. Now we're going to present the offer. And it's not just putting it in an email and sending it over. Even if you have the buyer sign the offer documents electronically, even if you have them sign them electronically, I think what I meant to say is manually, send them to the listing agent as PDFs. You're going to copy everything and send them over electronically. Write a warm cover note to the listing agent in your email. Dear Ms. Listing Agent, thank you so much for the opportunity to show your listing at 123 Elm Street. The buyers are thrilled to death with this home, and I'm happy on their behalf to present their offer. Okay. State that I just said that. List all the attached documents. So I'm pleased to present the attached offer. Find attached to this message: 1 to 4 family contract. 2, third-party financing addendum. 3, MUD notice. 4, HOA. 5, seller's disclosure. Every document you presented, list it there. And I tell you what, that right there is going to differentiate your offer from every other. A nice cover note, a listing of all the attachments, and they're all there. Shocking. Okay. And remember, if the disclosures had not been previously provided, you had reached out to the listing agent to ask for them. So you are presenting a complete offer. You don't have to wait on anything else. They don't have to be concerned that the pre-approval letter or proof of funds is going to come the next day, we hope. If you're lacking any disclosure documents because they're not been provided, ask for them. We already covered that previously. Except the MUD. Don't ever bring up the MUD, right? So don't ask for the MUD. Once you're under contract, it's appropriate to ask for it. And just keep this secret knowledge secret. There's no reason to ever cause anxiety on the part of the listing agent over the MUD. You just want to keep it in your back pocket and then pull it out if needed in a catastrophic situation. Okay? Correct. No, I did not say the MUD. And we have it on tape. I can prove it. And oh, that's right. Well, Miss Salazar, in my mind, as I went through those documents to include, I left off the MUD. Now, if it came out of my lips, I can't be responsible for that. But if I said it, then certainly it's not my fault. What's that? You wrote it. You wrote it. Oh, gosh. Y'all are ganging up on me. Everybody. Yes. Yes, you do need that MUD notice. I would just not ask for it until you're under contract.
What Frank is saying is if they posted the MUD notice on the listing, that everything they posted on the listing, you pull on, you sign.
Yes.
Buyer. So our offer is fully ready to be executed.
Yes.
They don't need to wait, oh, we've got to sign this home. Everything they got. But
that's right.
On the MLS listing, they didn't have the MUD notice. We don't call it out to them. We sign everything they posted. We have a complete offer. That's what he did.
That's right. The lack of a MUD notice is not going to invalidate the contract. It just gives the buyer a right to terminate. Okay. If your offer is less than list price, or we could even say here, say it's listed at 400 and they told you the offers are coming in at 410, 415 or whatever, and you can only show a value of 405 and that's all your buyers are willing to pay, write a note and explain that. So I understand that you've received some higher offers. However, based upon my study of the current market value, recent sales, and pricing trends in the neighborhood, I could not advise my buyer in good conscience to go over 405, okay? And you might say, why do you even do that if they've already said they've had higher offers? Well, those might be financed offers and yours is cash. Or some of those higher offers, when they found out they were in a multiple offer situation, they withdrew. Or maybe because the seller said they weren't going to consider offers until Monday at 5 p.m., they went shopping this weekend and found something they like better on Saturday or Sunday. So just don't presume that you're out of the game. Stay in the game if your buyers really like that property. If the buyer needs a response by a certain date and time, express that need and the reason for it. I got a text message this morning from an agent asking, is there a form for that? No, there's no form for it. But you can communicate that in your cover note. And you want to be very kind. It's not buyer demands an answer by certain time, certain date. Bully agents will do that. You express the reason for it. The buyers are moving here from Pittsburgh. Their company has only given them 1 weekend in which to find a home. So we'd really appreciate a response by 5 p.m. on Saturday. So if for any reason we're not able to make this deal work, they have 1 more day to go out and find another home. Okay, that's reasonable, right?
Yeah.
And you've explained the reason for wanting an accelerated response time. Number 8, ask the listing agent to let you know immediately if they need anything else from you. Now they shouldn't, because you've been very comprehensive, but ask the question. And then close by stating that you're eager to work with them for a win-win outcome and are looking forward to a positive reply to the offer. I always put this as the last thing. We look forward to a positive response from your sellers. Okay, you're just, again, creating the environment. That's what this is all about, creating a positive environment for a win-win outcome. Now, negotiating the offer. Let's presume that they push back a little bit. Okay, they're talking to you. They apparently like your offer well enough to engage, but you're going to negotiate on different points. Most agents are comfortable negotiating by phone and email rather than drafting a new written offer for each counteroffer. What I mean by that is new agents often think, well, we offered $275. They countered and said they want $280. We're not willing to go there, but we're going to write an offer at $277. We submit another offer. They come back and say $279. Well, no, we're not going to do that, but we'll go $278. So now we write up a whole new offer at $278. Unnecessary. Once you get a counter from the seller, you want to conduct negotiations preferably by phone. Preferably by phone. Why? No track record. That's exactly right. There's no record. We're talking as two professionals representing our clients. Let's see if we can't work to some point of agreement, even if it has to go back forth. 276. No, we said 279. Okay, we'll go 277. No, we need at least 278. Okay, have this discussion by phone. You could do it by email, but if you do it by email, first of all, there's a lot of room for people to interpret tone and stuff in email that could cause things to go wonky. You also, if you go by email, you have to be really careful in your language. For example, you're negotiating, say that you're the listing agent, and you say, okay, seller agrees to accept your offer at $278. Buyer's agent says, woohoo, we made a deal. So they go to draft up the revised offer at $278 and send it over. But before it arrives, the seller gets an offer at $285. Can the seller accept that offer? That's the kind of question that generates lawsuits. Because the language you used was, seller accepts the offer at $278. That's pretty strong. And it was in writing, and you're the legal representative. Now, some courts have ruled that's not sufficient to be binding on the seller. Other courts have said it is, but who wants to go to court? So what you want to say, if you're going to do this by email, which I don't recommend, but if you have to for some reason, then you want to be very careful in your language. Seller would be very interested in receiving your buyer's offer at $278. If you can get me an offer at $278, I think the sellers would be very interested in reviewing it. Okay, Use non-committal language. It's the same thing on the buyer side. You don't want to say on the buyer side, certainly in writing, you don't even want to do it orally. You don't want to say, okay, we're in agreement at 278. I'm going to write up the offer and send it over. Look forward to working with you. And then before it's signed by the seller, the buyer, let's say, loses their job and can't go forward. Or the husband or wife can't get off Zillow and they find something that's even shinier than the one they just agreed to purchase at 278. Hey, before you send that offer over, let's go look at this one. You go look at it. Oh, let's make an offer on this one. Are your buyers bound by your words? We accept your counter offer at 278. That's the potential for a lawsuit. There's no clear legal answer about whether they're bound or not. It could go either way. So just say, if you're in this situation, you're the buyer's agent, the seller has come to 278, all parties has said 278 is the number, then you can say, the buyer appreciates the seller's offer at 278. I'm going to go present this to the buyers right now, and I expect to be submitting an offer to you under these terms before 7 o'clock tonight. There's nothing in that language that said the buyers accept. Well, yeah. I mean, political means power. So yes, it is a power statement. And you're basically just keeping the options open for your client. Okay. Okay. Non-committal language. I put some on the slide here. Would the sellers consider? I think the buyer would be pleased with. I'd like to take a package back to my buyer like this. Perhaps we could meet at the middle at something like, or that sounds like something that could work. Let me check with my buyer. Let me check with my seller. Even if your seller has said, I'll take 278, don't put that in an email. Sounds like something that would be attractive to my seller. Write it up and send it over, and I'll get it in front of them right away. Okay? Non-committal language, because stuff happens. Okay? Just the facts, not. Because written words can fail to convey emotion and context, be extremely careful to not just send facts and terms in your messages. What's the title of this class? Put some sugar with it. Put some sugar with it. Don't just say offer terms 278, 21-day close, conventional financing, appraisal addendum attached. Okay, that's very cold. It doesn't convey warmth or humanity. So just always take an extra moment. And I would say and I catch myself when somebody sends me an email and they ask me a question, I'm very tempted to just answer, to hit reply and type their answer. And almost every time I look at that, I'm like, that's so impersonal. And I'll go back and I'll say, hey, Thomas, comma, and then just leave the rest of it there. But you personalize it. Hi, Miss Listing Agent, and then put your terms in there. Okay, but just always put some sugar with it. Fully explain each point of the offer, both to the cooperating agent and to your buyer. If there's something that's unusual about the offer, let's say that you do a $10,000 earnest money when only 3 is expected. Call that to the listing agent's attention. The buyers want the sellers to understand how serious they are about purchasing the home. So instead of a typical $3,000 earnest money deposit, you'll see in the contract, they're offering $10,000. We hope your sellers appreciate this gesture. Okay, just do some explanatory notes. Sample language, I've kind of been doing that all along, so I'll skip over that. Same thing here to the buyer. Now, what happens, and this is very common in this market, if the seller fails to respond in a timely manner? You've made an offer, heard nothing but crickets, okay? Reach out to the listing agent with an explanation of why you need a response by a certain date and time. And I already talked about this in the sense that you knew your buyers were under a deadline. But this is a different scenario. This is just a normal offer situation, no undue time pressure, but doggone it, you do want an answer. You want a response. So if they don't respond in a timely manner, then you reach out. Hey, the buyer's only in town for a few days, blah, blah, blah. The buyer has a second home they're interested in. And if this deal doesn't work out, he sure doesn't want to lose that one. I've used that so many times. That's great positioning language. Hey, the buyer really prefers the home that you've listed. But if this isn't going to work out, let us know, because there's another one that's very attractive to them. There's some leverage in that language. The buyer has to be in a new home in 6 weeks, so we've got to get something buttoned up pretty quick. You're just explaining the reason for the urgency of getting a reply. If your buyer ever tires of the negotiations, and sometimes they do kind of get stretched out, and decides to pursue other options, you must withdraw your offer. You can't just leave it hanging while they go find another home or decide they're going to stay where they're at for 6 months. Withdraw the offer with an email message to the listing agent so there is a record of the withdrawal. Okay? If it was a listing or a buyer rep agreement, there's forms for that. And there may actually be a form for this now, but it's not promulgated, so it's not required. An email, some written communication withdrawing the offer, do that. If you're submitting multiple offers at the same time, does this ever happen? I talked to an agent yesterday who did that. Sent 2 offers simultaneously. His buyers were so tired of being rejected, they just thought, let's go for it. And that's perfectly fine, particularly in this kind of market. Boy, you better have a fast finger. If one of those offers gets accepted, you want to very quickly withdraw the other one. But let's say that you get caught up in the euphoria of the acceptance and you forget, and then all of a sudden you get a second acceptance. What's worst case scenario for your buyer? They're going to have to pay a second option fee and then cancel, right? Which may cost them a few $100. You know who it's actually going to cost? You. It's going to cost the agent, right? You're going to end up paying that second option fee because it was your mistake, because you didn't withdraw that offer immediately upon the original acceptance. Okay. All right. Emotions can run high during negotiations. Your buyer may be tempted to personalize the process. And I have one couple, they've done multiple transactions with me. They always do this. It doesn't matter what happens with the initial offer or negotiations, they do what I call demonizing the seller, because they're always on the buy side. The seller is just being greedy. They didn't take our offer. They're greedy. They're just trying to squeeze us out of every dime we have. This is the kind of language my clients go to. The seller's trying to take advantage of me. The seller thinks we're stupid. You know, this kind of language. The seller's crazy if he thinks his house is worth that much. So when you pick up on this kind of language, you want to, first of all, don't feed it. Don't throw gas on the fire. And it's very tempting to do that because we want to identify with our clients. We want them to know that we're on the same page with them and we get the frustration that they have. But I guarantee you, if you get sucked into this, it's just going to turn into a vortex that it's out of control. And they're not going to buy the deal, right? Because they hate the sellers. So you need to step back into professional mode. Remember, set expectations. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, do you remember when we talked back in my office when we started this process about a month ago? And I said that the sellers are going to negotiate hard because they want the best deal for themselves and their family. That's exactly what we're doing. So we don't really know their motives, but they don't know you personally. So I'm sure this is not personal against you. They don't They don't think you're stupid or anything like that. They're just trying to negotiate the best deal. And I'm on your side to negotiate the best deal for you. Okay, so let's stay engaged. You want the property. It's great for you. And the last one I worked with them on was a commercial property. It's going to make you hundreds of thousands of dollars in net income every year. Let's stay in. Let's see if we can get it. Okay. Remain calm, explain these things. I get ahead of myself talking ahead of the slides. Very important. You cannot control emotions through text and email. And I know that we're all so busy, we prefer that, you know, the quick hit and move on. But in a situation where emotions are rising, you need to pick up the phone. Let them hear your calmness, the soothing tones and the timbre of your voice, okay? So that, again, they take their emotional cues from you and calm down. Phrases change meaning with tone and pacing. This is kind of fun. If communication is critical, voice conversation is the only viable option. Have y'all seen these phrases before? The difference a comma makes. Let's eat, Grandpa, or let's eat, Grandpa. Okay. If you forget a comma in your text message, you know, they could get the wrong message here.
The front line is, Panda walks into a bar.
Okay.
He
Eats, shoots, and leaves. Panda walks into a bar. He eats, shoots, and leaves. Does he eat, shoots, and leaves, or does he eat, shoot, and leaves? See? Or I like this is a good one. This is one of my favorites. Stop clubbing baby seals. Okay, stop beating them over the head. Don't club the baby seals. Or baby seals, stop clubbing. Not good for you. Stay on that all night. Look at them. You see the baby seals? They did not like that message. Stop clubbing baby seals. That's just a little fun. You get the point. Language matters. Pauses, intonation, feeling. So in critical conversations, pick up the phone. If you sense the seller, that's the other side, or the listing agent is losing patience or is not understanding your offer or the situation, pick up the phone. Same thing. The buyer really wants to make this work. He just wants to make sure he's not overpaying for the home. Give us just a little bit more time. I need to actually put the buyer in the car and go show him a couple other homes, comparable homes on the market, so he can see that your home is priced fairly. Okay, if you can give us just a few hours, that's what I mean, to explain the situation. The buyer really appreciates the seller's patience. This is taking longer than we all hoped, but we're completely committed to a successful outcome. We're not just playing you. We're not acting like this is not a serious negotiation. It is. It's just taking a little bit longer than expected. The husband's on a business trip. The wife's in the mountains and doesn't have good cell service. Whatever it is, explain the situation. Let me assure you, we're negotiating in good faith and doing everything possible to reach an agreement. I know that's what we all want. Okay. Negotiating repairs. So we've got under contract, successfully negotiated initial price and terms. And now, Pete, to your point, we've had an inspection during the option period and we need to negotiate. Here's my advice to you. Counsel your buyer to limit requests to items impacting the safety, functionality, and structural integrity of the home. Even though the inspector said the gutters are full of leaves, we're not going to put that in our repair amendment. That's a homeowner maintenance item that the buyer can very easily take care of after closing. We're only looking for the big items, the big ticket items, because every inspection is going to have 100 issues. Okay, you want to limit your requests to the most important. It's usually not appropriate to ask for code updates. So these days you can't have an outlet near a sink that's not GFCI protected. Well, that wasn't the case in 1972 when this home was built. But if that's of importance to the buyer, you know what they can do after closing? Run down to Home Depot, buy a GFCI and switch it out. Takes about 5 minutes, costs them about $8. Again, it's not a big deal. Let's focus on, the roof, which is leaking, or the foundation, which is crooked, or the stove, which won't light. Let's focus on safety and structural integrity issues, things that impact our ability to live in the home comfortably, okay? This is, you're counseling your buyer before you go through the inspection with them. If a financial settlement is negotiated, in other words, the seller says, you know what, we're not going to fix all 16 things, but we'll contribute $5,000 towards your buyer's closing costs. Would that be okay? Buyer does happy dance because they know they can get all this done for $2,000. Agents, please do not write on the amendment, seller is contributing $5,000 to buyer's closing costs in lieu of repairs. What's the problem with that language? The lenders, they not only don't like it, they will not finance a home that has issues. If they're not going to finance a defective home. So you just use the amendment and you just put in that little blank, that amount in 12B of the 1 to 4 family contract is changed to, and you write in 5,000. You don't need to explain it. No explanation. Never put that any repairs are going to be done after closing. Again, the lender is not going to lend on a defective home, and never say that a contribution is done in lieu of repairs. Where can I find today's session? I'm sorry, that flashed on the screen and was gone before I could see the whole thing. Recording, can someone tell? Yes, I can. I'll be uploading this to our YouTube channel either later this afternoon or this evening. YouTube.com/ it's changed. Abby Team, there you go, Cy. YouTube.com/Abby Team. Very good. When submitting your amendment for repairs or seller contribution, send the inspection report, link each request to an item on the inspection report, and if you've obtained estimates for repairs, attach them, okay? Again, give them a complete package. And then a little cover note. Please find the attached repair amendment. You'll know that the buyer has been very reasonable. You're putting some sugar with it here, and is only asking for items that impact the safety, functionality, or structural integrity of the home. Explain why you're asking, or the buyer's asking for these things. Reasonable or not reasonable? Tell me what you think. Hot water heater is 10 years old but functioning. Should we ask for it to be replaced? Unreasonable. AC drip pan shows signs of rust. Every AC pan shows signs of rust, okay? It's missing 3 shingles. This is a little bit, to me, what this says is further investigation might be necessary. So that's kind of an iffy one. Home, no, they don't like it, but they're not going to see it typically. Home built in 1983 lacks GFCIs in kitchen. Probably unreasonable, since that's a code update and it's so easily fixed by the buyer. Driveway needs to be power washed. Homeowner maintenance item. Roof sags over the garage. Structural issue, serious issue. Absolutely, we want that fixed. Having the sellers pay for a home warranty can ease many concerns over functioning but old appliances. Remember the hot water heater that's 10 years old but it's still heating? Maybe we need to get a home warranty. Okay, so that if it does go out in the next year, there'll be some compensation to help with that. Let's not talk about the appraisals because we've kind of already touched on that. Closing, and actually we didn't, negotiating appraisals, because this is a different issue. If the appraisal comes in low, what can be done about it? Well, the listing agent honestly is the one who should be appealing that, because they're trying to do what? Raise the price, right? And this is more of a normal market scenario where the buyer's not going to pay more than appraisal. In today's market, they've already assigned the waiver addendum. But it really is the listing agent's responsibility to gather comps, reach out to the appraiser, and justify the contract sale price. Don't try to take that on as a buyer's agent. Let the listing agent make the case. And if you're a listing agent and you're concerned that the appraisal is going to come in low, call the appraiser in advance, meet them at the home, and bring your comps which justify the price with you. And it may be that, well, the comps don't justify the price, but in this home, we've put in all these upgrades in the outdoor kitchen, which are not reflected in these comps. So again, you can justify it in advance and not have to appeal later.
Right, there's one other option, right? If the appraisal comes in low, the buyer still wants it, they could consider another vendor and they would get another appraisal. No assurance it would be different, but you can't ask the original lender to appraise it twice, but you could say, I'm switching to lender B, please send out your appraisal.
Well, actually, and things change all the time, now you can get a second appraisal from most lenders. Yeah, they will often send out for a second opinion if you can present them with some evidence that the first one was unreasonably low. But yes, you can also switch lenders if they're not going to cooperate with you. You'll incur some additional expense. If it's a government-sponsored loan, you're not going to get a second opinion, and it's going to stay on record for 6 months. So even somebody else who comes in after you, that appraiser is going to have access to the original appraisal. Okay, so very difficult to get those moved. All right, let me sum this up, because I know I've worn you out just about. Put some sugar with it. Be positive and professional at all times, especially when it's difficult. Carefully explain and justify each negotiating request. That's with the initial offer. This is why we're offering this price. This is why we're asking for this closing date. It includes repairs. Please note that we're only asking that the sagging roof be replaced. The buyers are going to get a home warranty. We'll take care of that hot water heater if it goes out. Explain what you're doing. When there is potential for misunderstanding, conduct negotiations on the phone or in person, okay? So they can hear your voice and know that you're being reasonable and not just a cold automaton, okay? That's what I wanted to share with you today. Any questions, pushback, feedback on what you've heard today?
Just want me to clarify the month, so contract has been signed. The month did come, it came in late.
Yes.
He still came back out.
Yes, if the MUD comes in after the contract is executed, it's a valid MUD, but the buyer retains the right to cancel the contract and get the earnest money back. Okay.
And all of Harris County has at least one.
Yeah, we learned this in class recently when I was teaching on this. I was making the point that Harris County, there's generally 2 MUDs. And in the course of looking at a subject property, we discovered there were 3. And if there's 3 MUDs, there must be 3 MUD notices because the information on each one is specific to that particular MUD. So you want to be very careful. You know, one was like flood control. One, oh, that's right. The other one was like Port of Houston. And then the other one was basic, you know, water sewer. So there were 3. Something, yeah, it was something that, yeah, it was Port was in the, yes, somewhere in there. And it was by definition a water district, and it was on the MUD list that we pulled up on the MLS. Absolutely. And you know how we discovered them? Was we pulled the appraisal district report on the property where it shows every entity that the property pays tax to. And one of them was very obvious. The second one we were looking for, but then we saw the third one. We're like, gosh, we don't know about that one. We looked it up. It was on the list. So if it's in a MUD, it has to have its own MUD notice. Okay.
Some properties we come on have been annexed
Yes.
with one district,
Yes.
that type of property has been.
Yes. If it's been annexed and it's still in a MUD district, MUD notice must be provided. But that will show up on the tax record. That's the quickest way to identify if there's a potential MUD there. Okay, guys, I appreciate y'all hanging in there with me. I have enjoyed this discussion. The next time you get in a ticklish negotiating situation, if you want to talk about it, please reach out to me. I'm happy to help anytime.
Thanks, Brian.